Hey folks, welcome back to Markelly Farm. Yeah, it's me. I gave the beard up for a little bit. Been doing a lot of painting lately, so my respirator wasn't sealing on that beard. But we're going to be doing something here in the kitchen today, so follow along and we'll get our recipe on here. So we are going to make a pumpkin pie with this butternut squash. You can make pies with squash. You can make pies with sweet potatoes. You can make pies with just about anything that you can cook up in a pan and make soft, like our butternut squash here. And a lot of your store-bought pies are actually made with some squash, because squash is a lot easier to deal with than pumpkins, because pumpkins have that big thin skin you got to peel and scoop all the seeds out and all this stuff. This is just very little seeds in here, just in one little pocket, and a lot more flesh in here for the size of the squash. So first things first, we need to get this squash cleaned up. We're going to slice it long ways. We'll scoop the seeds out, and then we're going to peel it and cube it up so it cooks faster in the pot. Now, if you wanted to bake this till it was soft, you could do that too. A lot of people think that it holds more of the flavor when you bake it instead of boiling it. But I'm on kind of a time crunch today, so we're going to boil this squash. There's what your butternut squash looks like on the inside. I just use a big tablespoon, and all that scoops out of there just like if you were doing a pumpkin. You want to scoop pretty aggressively because this stringy stuff will hang on pretty good. Make sure you get down to the pumpkin flesh, and then we'll do the other one obviously, and then we'll get these sliced up. Don't those look pretty? When you're all done, you can save your seeds if you like and treat them just as you would pumpkin seeds. You could toast them up and eat those, or you could save them for planting in the garden next year. The only issue is if you had more than one type of squash in the garden, they can cross-pollinate and you won't get true butternut squash next year. You'll get some weird variety that may not taste good, and I wouldn't take the chance. So if you've had other squash near this one, go ahead and do not save those for planting in the garden. Now when I go to peel these, I cut the bulb end off of the long end, and that makes it easier to peel with the knife. I just slice down the skin with the knife, and then we'll cut the end off here and do the same with this. You would do the same thing with like a pumpkin. You scoop the inside out and then cut it and then peel the outside off. Now I also do watermelon this way. I'll cut a watermelon in half and then lay the flat side down, then cut the rind off the outside. That way you get as much watermelon as you can out of that, and then just cube it all up. So I'm going to continue to peel these, and then we'll chop them up. There is all of our butternut squash cubed up. So to this we put just enough water to cover, and then we're going to add about 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. And the acid in the lemon juice is going to help preserve the flavor of that squash. You can do the same thing, like I said, with sweet potatoes or pumpkin, because we are making a pumpkin pie, right? All right, put it on your stove, put a lid on it, bring it to a boil, and then turn it down to a simmer. And simmer that until it's kind of knife tender, where you can stick like a paring knife in it and kind of twist it, and it'll kind of split in half. It'll come apart on you. It'll take a little bit longer than potatoes or sweet potatoes because the butternut squash is a little bit more dense. But that's what you're looking for. Once we're done, I'll tell you kind of how long it took. Now what we're making here is, if you were to go buy a can of pumpkin at the store, that's what this is going to pretty much be like when it's done cooking. It's going to be soft, ready to use. Now, if you were like me, I made a mistake when I was young. I liked pumpkin pie, and I saw a can of that in the pantry, and I opened it up thinking I'm going to be eating pumpkin pie out of a can. Boy, was I wrong. It was just barely cooked, unsweetened pumpkin. And I got the surprise of my life. That was the nastiest thing ever. This is not going to be pumpkin pie filling until we add everything else in it. Now, you can buy pumpkin pie filling at the store that's already done, but it's so much better if you make it at home. So once this is all done, we'll use the measured amount for the pie that we're going to make, and then we'll add in all the rest of the stuff. Now, if you were in a bigger hurry and you wanted to speed this process up, if you had an Instapot or a pressure cooker, you could cook your pumpkin or your squash in that, and it would be a lot faster than just simmering on the stove. Now, the other thing you can do for preservation, if you wanted to, winter squash, you know, they last a long time just on their own. But you could get this stuff cubed up like we did, pack it in a quart jar with some water with just a little bit of lemon juice or citric acid, fruit fresh, whatever, and can them in quart jars. And as you pressure can these, because they're low acid, you have to pressure can them for 90 minutes in a quart jar. Once that 90 minutes is done, your squash or your pumpkin or whatever you're canning is already cooked. So shelf stable, put it on the shelf, bring it out anytime you need it, just drain it when you open the jar, and you have your cooked material to make pie with, or even dinner. You could warm it up in the liquid and then pour the liquid off, add a little butter and brown sugar. You've got a good meal. This is the stuff that we did last year. See, it's got a little bit of the squash sediment down in the bottom, but that's no big deal. That rinses right out when you rinse it. It's been right at an hour, so let's check it. Stick a fork into this one. See how that comes apart? That's what we're looking for. So we can turn the fire off. So the next thing is drain your squash. That's what I love about these wherever pots. I've had these for years. They have the strainers right in the lid. Got big on one side, little on the other. And you just line those up with the pour spout, and it drains perfectly. So we're going to let this cool, and while this cools, we're going to make the pastry. Got our two pastry crusts here. You can see the little butter pieces in here. That's exactly what you want. You do not want that worked into the dough. Let's get these in the fridge. So let's start on our pie filling now. You need to preheat your oven to 425. And then we have our squash that we cooked earlier. We just got a potato masher in here and we smashed it all up to where there was no more lumps. And then we're going to make two pies, so we're going to double the recipe. We're going to need a cup and 3/4 for each pie. So that's going to come out to, let's see, 3.5 cups. So let's see if we have 3.5 cups. What do you know? We had exactly 3.5 cups. So one good sized butternut squash will do 2 pies. So the next ingredient is 1 full teaspoon of salt for 2 pies. 3.5 cups of milk. Got another 1.5 cups to do. Next item is 6 eggs. Next item is 1 1/3 cup of brown sugar. 4 tablespoons of just regular white sugar. 2.5 teaspoons of ground cinnamon. And then 1 teaspoon each of clove and nutmeg. This is a 1/2 teaspoon measure, so we're doing 2 of them. Here we go. Now we're going to blend all this up. So use a rotary blender or just get you a wire whisk out until it's combined really well. Make sure you don't have any chunks of pumpkin still floating around in there, or eggs that aren't beaten yet. Just give it a good beating. Now once it's completely combined really well, we're just going to split it between our two pastries, and then we're going to put it in the oven for 50 to 55 minutes. And then we'll have pie, folks. Alright, we got them in the oven. We'll come through about halfway around and rotate these pies 90 degrees. We had some extra filling, so I just got out a few ramekins, filled them up. We'll throw those in the oven. They won't take as long as the pies, but we'll have some little pumpkin pie treats or squash pie treats. Now, of course, you don't have to use my recipe for this pie. You can use your favorite pumpkin pie recipe. Just replace the pumpkin itself with the squash. This recipe I'm using is more of a traditional recipe. It's an old Betty Crocker recipe, but it's not quite as sweet as your new ones that use the sweetened condensed milk and stuff like that. Alright, our pies are out of the oven. To check them, you just stick a knife about 1 inch away from the outside of the crust, and if the knife comes out clean, it's ready. Don't worry about the middle, because that will continue to cook and set up. But look how beautifully flaky that crust is. Pretty cool. We probably should have covered the outside with foil. Cooked a little bit darker than I would like. This one was a little thicker, so it didn't cook as much. This was a thinner crust here. But beautifully flaky. And then we have our little pumpkin pie treats here. Alright, it's time for the taste test. Looks yummy. Golden brown crust on the bottom. That's good pie. Tastes like fall. Alright folks, that's how you make pie with squash. So hope you enjoyed the recipe. The squash will keep a lot longer in a root cellar than a pumpkin will. So, till next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. Come back and see us here on Markelly Farm.